Good day, everyone. So, welcome back. Welcome back. It's been quite a while. I am sorry for the prolonged delay, but we are here. So, let's start from where we stopped. All right. So, let's start from where we stopped. I'm happy. I'm happy to be back. All right. I'm so happy to be back. So, in this module of our class, we are going to be talking about literature review, or what is fondly called review of related literature. So basically, review of related literature is divided into three important segments. So we have conceptual review, theoretical framework, and empirical reviews. All right. Conceptual review, theoretical framework, and empirical review. However, depending on what you're writing for and where you're writing it, some departments, some faculties, or some journal houses will require you include what is fondly called conceptual framework. All right, so conceptual framework is nothing other than a diagram that represents the flow and interconnectivity of your variables, how the variables relate to one another, how they interact in your study. So we're going to be covering all these things in this module of the class. So let's start with what conceptual review is, and we're going to be taking a practical topic so that we'll dissect and see how to do a proper conceptual review for the work. And the topic we are going to be discussing about today is workplace bullying and performance of selected pharmaceutical firms in Southeast Nigeria. Okay, so remember that in research there is nothing like danglers. All right, danglers are things that are not hooked to anything. All right, so it flows. You mustn't have danglers, things that you just bring into the work without having any relationship with the chapter 1 of the work. Okay, so everything you're going to be reviewing conceptually must come from the variables in your work. And like we've said before in the beginning of this class, before we stopped, there is what is called broad variables and specific variables. So your broad variables are those variables in your topic, while specific variables are those variables you have in your specific objectives. All right, so for our work, our broad variables are workplace bullying, which is the independent variable, and the performance, which is dependent on workplace bullying. So those are our broad objectives, while our specific objectives, which will be drawn from the objective of the work. One will have the objective. Specific objective number 1 is to identify the type of relationship that exists between workplace aggression and job withdrawal in the selected firms. Number 2 is to explore the type of relationship that exists between social exclusion and employee attrition, while number 3 is to examine the relationship that exists between workloads and emotional exhaustion. Okay, so drawing from these 3 specific objectives, you will see that the variables for workplace bullying are workplace aggression, social exclusion, and workloads, while the variables for performance are job withdrawal, employee attrition, and emotional exhaustion. So in your conceptual review, these are the things that you're going to be reviewing in the literature review, or the review of related literature in your work. All right, so let's get right in. So we are going to start with the first broad variable, which is workplace bullying. And workplace bullying is the independent broad objective. All right, so under conceptual review, if you're writing a thesis or a dissertation or a project, you're expected to number it. All right, so you have a 2.1.1, which will have a subtitle named workplace bullying. So under this conceptual review named workplace bullying, you're expected to tell us what workplace bullying is based on what other people have said it is. Most persons confuse conceptual review to just be definition of the concepts you're looking at. Like most persons will just go to other works done and look at workplace bullying and what they said it is. They will just define. For example, they will say Okeke defined workplace bullying as. After that, they will say Okafor opines that workplace bullying is this. Okonkwo states that workplace bullying is this. This is not what conceptual review is all about. In conceptual review, you're supposed to, after defining the concept based on what other people said, then you're also expected to dissect what you yourself feel that the concept is. For example, let me define workplace bullying. So let's assume Okonkwo defines workplace bullying as a scenario where employees are abused, teased, and negatively marked in an unpleasant manner on a frequent basis. All right, so this is the definition given by Okonkwo, for example. So you're expected to interrogate this definition and bring out the salient points in the definition. You see that it talked about workplace bullying being negative. Okay, you talked about workplace bullying being frequent and unpleasant. So you can say that from this definition, it can be seen that for anything to be termed workplace bullying, it must be negative. Okay, it must be negatively affecting the employee, which the behavior is being meted out to. All right, you can also say for something to pass as workplace bullying that it must be frequent. Okay, that workplace bullying is not a one-off thing. All right, workplace bullying must be something that is done or is meted out to the employee on a frequent basis. Could be weekly or daily basis. It's not just something that is done to an employee once and you term it to be workplace bullying. It must be affecting the employees negatively, which may affect the performance of the employee. So after interrogating this definition, you can go ahead to look at the definition given by another person. Let's say another person defines workplace bullying as the irrational use of power to attack other individuals or to attack others individually or collectively, either verbally, physically, socially, or psychologically. So from this definition, you can also go ahead to interrogate or to look at the major concepts or the major things that the definer looked at. For example, he talked about using power to attack others individually. So you can say that that workplace bullying mustn't be an attempt to abuse an individual or an employee, that it could be done to a group of employees. Okay, because he talked about being collective. Then he talks about being verbal, physical, social, or psychological. So you can go ahead to say in this definition, it can also be seen that workplace bullying is not just physical. It could be verbal, it could be psychological, or it could be social. Okay, so after interrogating all these things, before you now look at what another person have said about it. All right, so this is how to do conceptual review, and not just presenting the definition of other people. You must also present your own view, whether you are agreeing to the definition, whether you are not agreeing to the definition. And another very important point to note in conceptual review, most journal houses, they are particular about the dates of your references. I don't know if we've dealt with references before. Your references should be recent. Okay, you cannot be talking about workplace bullying in 2022 and you're going to bring the definition of workplace bullying in 1984 or 1985, except if you're trying to look at the history of workplace bullying, how it started how it has developed from one country to another. But if you're not looking at the historical aspect of the concept you're reviewing, please, your references should be as recent as possible. 2021, 2022, 2020 shouldn't be, you shouldn't go far, you shouldn't go below 2010. Okay, you shouldn't go below 2010. It should be very recent, and that's why you should be very, very meticulous about the type of materials you download to do your conceptual review. It is very, very important. So after reviewing the concept of workplace bullying, you can now review the specific variables of workplace bullying. You know, initially I listed the specific variables of workplace bullying to include workplace aggression, social exclusion, and workloads. Okay, so these are the variables of workplace bullying. So you can now start reviewing the other specific concepts. So you look at what other persons have talked about workplace aggression, what they defined it as, what are the things termed as workplace aggression. Also, be mindful of the recency of your references. Okay, so after that, you talk about social exclusion. What is social exclusion? What could be termed social exclusion? Then you also look at workloads. Okay, so after this, you now go to your dependent variable, which will start from a performance. And after you must have looked at performance, looking at performance now, you may look at performance from the qualitative or the quantitative angle. What do I mean? How you define performance depends on the type of organization you're studying. For example, if you want to capture performance in a manufacturing firm or a bank, you are more likely to use quantitative things to capture it. You talk about profitability, you talk about return on assets, return on investments, number of branches, and others. But if you're talking about performance in a service rendering firm, for example, a service rendering firm like universities, you cannot be talking about profits, especially if it has to do with government-owned institution. Okay, you cannot be talking about return on assets or return on investment. Okay, you now use qualitative terms. You can now start using terms like employee commitment, job satisfaction. Like we used here, we used job withdrawal, we used emotional exhaustion and employee attrition. So you now look at all these variables based on what other persons have talked or defined them as. You also interrogate them, giving lending your own voice to what they've said. Okay, so this is how to do conceptual review. Then when you're done, depending on where you're writing the project or the article, they may require that you draw a conceptual framework which will show the relationship between your variables. So I'm going to share this is a typical conceptual framework that you can use to capture this work. Then after that, you now move into theoretical framework. Okay, so what is a theoretical framework? All right, theoretical framework is nothing apart from theories that relate to your work. Okay, theories that have something to do with your work. So if you're doing theoretical framework or theoretical review, you look for theories that the tenets of the theory are related somehow to your work, or you can relate the theory to your work. Okay, so most times people make the mistake of looking for theories that has the title of their work. For example, our work is on workplace bullying. So people almost tend to look for theories that has to do with workplace bullying theory, workplace something theory, but it's not so. You can use any theory provided that you can link the theory to your work based on the tenets of the theory or based on what the theory is talking about. For example, we can use organizational support theory to link this work. Okay, you can use organizational support theory. What does organizational support theory say? Organizational support theory states that employees who perceive that their employers or their managers are treating them in a favorable way will most likely want to reciprocate those favorable behavior and put in their best in the organization. Okay, so when the employees perceive that their supervisors, their managers, or their employers are treating them well, they are paying them well as at when due, they are making sure that their health and their security are being taken care of, those employees will reciprocate by being more committed. Okay, they will reciprocate by having better commitment to their work. They will also reciprocate by not leaving the organization. Okay, so with this organizational support theory now and its tenet, you can relate it to the work by stating that workplace bullying are not favorable behavior. Okay, they are not favorable behavior. Employees won't perceive it to be good behavior, or the employees will see it as a way of looking down on them or affecting their physical, emotional, or social psychic. So they are going to reciprocate by being dissatisfied with their work, by not being committed, by leaving the organization, which is employee attrition. Okay, so you can use this to relate to your work, but the question will now be, how do you present your theory? Okay, so typically you would just say that this work is anchored on organizational support theory. Organizational support theory was propounded by so and so. You state the year. Okay, once you are done, then you talk about the tenets of the theory. What does the theory talk about? What are the things the theory is talking about? When you're done, some people will even go further to say you should criticize the theory, though I don't buy that. But some people will insist that you have to criticize the theory. Then when you're done, you now bring out a separate paragraph where you're going to relate your theory to the work. Okay, there is a saying that it is what you call your dog that your dog will answer. All right, so you can bring any theory, provided you are going to find a particular way to link your theory to your work. That theory will fly. All right, and you mustn't use one theory. You can use different theories. You can use one, you can use two, you can use three theories. Okay, so you can use one theory to relate one objective, another theory to relate another objective, and yet another theory to relate another objective. But if you have one theory that captures all the objectives of your work, then fine, you can do that. All right, so that is what theoretical framework is: looking for the theories that relate to your work, telling them or telling us what the tenets of your theories or your theory is, how it relates to your work, who propounded it, when it was propounded. You can even go further to talk about which other theories that your theory is related to, where your theory is driven from, because some theories are built to support other theories. All right, some theories are like a breakaway from other theory, judging from the criticism of a theory. In order to fix the challenge of those criticisms, another theory will now be propounded to fix those other criticisms, and a theory will be born. So this is how to do theoretical framework. And when you're done, you now go into empirical review. Empirical review is like the simplest thing to do in conceptual review. So we are going to look at empirical review in details, and why empirical review, what empirical reviews are used for, and what are the things that are expected to be in any empirical reviews. So before we delve into empirical reviews, let's look at why empirical reviews are important. Empirical reviews are done for basically two things. All right, two things. One, to help you look at what other persons have done. Okay, and under this, what other persons have done, it will help you to see when they did it. Okay, how they did it, their methodology and their findings. Okay, so it's from this empirical review that you're going to be able to spot gap in knowledge. We are still going to come to gap in knowledge, which is part of chapter 2. Okay, so gap in knowledge. All right, so the second reason why we do empirical review is to help you to compare your findings against the findings of other persons that have carried out a similar research in your area. Okay, so in your chapter 4, the empirical review that you did will enable you to compare your own result against their own result to find out if their results are in alignment with your own or if they are different with your own findings, and if possible give feasible reasons why their results are different from your own, and if they are similar you may also wish to give reasons why they are similar with your own results. Okay, so there are specific ingredients that must be found in every empirical review. Okay, every empirical review must have specific characteristics, okay, or specific features, if I'll put it that way. So these features include: 1, the name of the authors or the name of the researcher or researchers, the year, okay, the topic, the country, the methodology, and the findings. Okay, the name of the authors or researchers the case may be, the year, the topic, the place, that is the country now, the methodology, that's talking about the population, the sample size, the method of data analysis, then the findings. Then other persons will suggest you add conclusion and recommendation, but conclusion and recommendation to me are not necessary. What you need is those things that I mentioned before: the name of the researchers or researcher, the place, the dates, the topic, the methodology, and the findings. Okay, then most times everything you need for your empirical review, you get it from the abstract. Okay, so 90% of the time all this information are contained in the abstract of every work. Okay, so you just copy and paste, and make sure you edit. All right, make sure you edit what you've copied, because if you don't edit, it will be plagiarism. Okay, so make sure you edit what you copied. Okay, another important part we need to note while doing empirical reviews that not every work is suitable to be used as an empirical review. Okay, the work that you must use as an empirical review must be a quantitative work. It must be a work that contains methodology. It must be a work that an analysis have been done on. That is, if the work you're doing is a quantitative work, is a work that you must do an analysis on. But if you are not going to do an analysis on your work, then you may also use a work that didn't carry out any analysis in their own. All right, so make sure that these important features are contained in your empirical review. And when you're done, we'll now move into gap in knowledge. Okay, before gap in knowledge, you may do a summary of what you've reviewed, but it's not necessary all the time. Okay, it's not necessary all the time, but if you must do it, then you do summary of what you've reviewed. Some people just do summary of your empirical review. Well, if it is acceptable where you're doing it, fine, but if it is not, you're supposed to do a summary of everything that you've reviewed under your chapter 2, talking about the conceptual review, talking about the theoretical review, and the empirical review. Okay, so we're going to stop here. For this class. Then next 2 weeks, which is next 2 weeks will be the next time we're going to hold this class. So we are going to look at how to spot gap in knowledge and summary of reviewed literature. Then we'll enter chapter 3. Okay.